The world didn't end with fire or thunder. It ended with silence. Eli Mercer sat on the crumbling edge of what used to be a highway overpass, his rifle resting beside him. The city below, once a shining jewel of glass and steel, now lay swallowed in shadows and crawling corpses. The wind carried a sour scent of rot, dust, and despair. He closed his eyes. For once, he didn't dream of the monsters. He dreamed of her. Eli, came the soft echo in his mind, her voice, Myra. The woman who taught him to hope again, the woman he couldn't save. He felt the phantom warmth of her hand against his cheek, then the gunshot that tore her away forever. Not by a zombie, by a human. By his best friend. That memory was a scar that never healed the moment Trust died for him. The world after that was only survival, kill or be killed. Hope was a luxury, love was a trap. Eli rose, shouldering his weapon, scanning the ruins below. The infected were thinning in this sector, drawn north by a military evacuation. He knew better, there were no safe zones left, only people waiting to die slower. He turned toward the skeletal remains of a billboard, its faded slogan mocking him through cracked paint. A brighter tomorrow starts today. Yeah, Eli muttered, right. He started down the rubble slope when the ground trembled. A pulse of energy, low, deep, unnatural, rippled through the air. He froze. The wind shifted, the world seemed to fold. The skyline flickered like a broken film reel. The dark clouds tore apart, revealing light white, blinding, pure. What the hell, he whispered, raising an arm against it. And then the world shattered. He gasped awake, heart pounding. The smell of coffee filled the air. Coffee. His head jerked up. He wasn't on a ruined highway anymore. He was sitting at a cluttered desk, papers scattered, monitors humming. The sunlight slanted through clean glass. People walked past the open office door. He looked down at his hands, young again, unscarred. His phone buzzed. Myra, you coming to lunch, or are you glued to your screen again? Eli's breath hitched. He stared at the message. His fingers trembled. No, he whispered. No, this is. He grabbed the calendar. Date, May 15th, 2032. 10 years before the outbreak. Before everything, before her death. Before humanity fell. He slumped back in his chair, pulse racing. I'm back. His mind whirled with impossible thoughts. Was it heaven, punishment, some experiment? None of it mattered. He remembered the virus, the collapse, the betrayals. The friends turned monsters, both infected and human. And he remembered how it started. A biotech company. A cure for cell degeneration gone wrong. Zithra Labs. And Eli worked for them. He looked out at the city skyline, clean, alive and beautiful. A world that didn't know it was living on borrowed time. Eli clenched his fists. This time he wouldn't watch it burn. This time he'd change everything. Eli sat motionless at his desk, staring at the familiar logo glowing on his computer screen. Zithra Laboratories, healing the future. The slogan was innocent enough, but Eli knew better. He had watched this company's dream turn into humanity's nightmare. Zithra's gene therapy, Project Lazarus, was meant to regenerate dying cells, cure disease, and cheat death itself. Instead, it created something that could not die. Eli had been part of it once, a small cog in a machine of ambition and pride, and now he was back 10 years earlier with all the knowledge of what would happen. He closed his eyes, whispering to himself, if this is real, if I can really change it, then I have to. A knock broke his trance. Still talking to yourself, Mercer. That teasing voice froze him. He turned, and there she was. Myra. Her chestnut hair caught the sunlight as she leaned on the doorframe, holding 2 coffee cups. The same warm brown eyes, the same soft grin. Alive, radiant, whole. "Don't look so surprised," she said, crossing the room and handing him a cup. "You always look like the world's ending when I find you working." He swallowed hard. "Yeah, maybe it is." Myra raised an eyebrow. "Morbid much, it's Tuesday." Her laughter filled the room, and for a heartbeat, the apocalypse felt like a dream. But the ache in Eli's chest reminded him it was. "Listen," he said, voice low, "what do you know about Project Lazarus?" She frowned. "That's top clearance. Why?" Eli searched her face, remembering how she used to trust him, how their friendship became love, how it all ended in blood and betrayal. He couldn't tell her everything, not yet. She'd think he'd lost his mind. "Just promise me something," he said. "If anything feels wrong, strange, don't ignore it. And if I ever tell you to run, you run." Her smile faltered. "Eli, what's going on?" He forced a smile, "Just a hunch." But his mind was already racing. He needed evidence, proof that he wasn't trapped in a hallucination, something small to test the timeline. A butterfly effect. That evening, Eli left the lab early, something his old self never did. He stopped by a local coffee shop near the river, the same one that would be burned to ash within the first week of the outbreak. He ordered a coffee, sat down, and waited. At exactly 6:37 p.m., a man in a dark gray coat entered. Eli remembered him, Marcus Vale, a junior researcher who would later steal Project Lazarus data and sell it to a rival company. His betrayal would leak the infection before Zithra could contain it. Marcus approached the counter, fidgeting with his phone. Eli rose, walked over, and accidentally bumped his shoulder hard. "Watch it, man," Marcus snapped. Eli smiled coldly. "Careful where you sell your soul, Vale." Marcus blinked, confused. "What?" Eli leaned closer. "Some secrets aren't worth the blood they'll cost." Then he left. That night, lying in bed, Eli replayed every detail in his mind: the sound of Myra's laughter, Marcus's confusion, the soft hum of the city alive again. If this was real, the smallest changes could ripple forward. A conversation here, a warning there. Enough ripples and maybe he could stop the storm. The next morning, Eli checked his messages before heading to the lab. His breath caught. Company announcement: Zithra will delay Project Lazarus Phase II human trials due to internal security concerns. He exhaled sharply. It worked. The butterfly had flapped its wings. He had changed something. But fate was not going to yield so easily. That afternoon, as he walked through the laboratory corridor, 2 security officers passed him, escorting a nervous man in a gray coat. Marcus Vale. Eli stopped dead. "Wait, what's going on?" One guard replied, "Dr. Vale was caught trying to access restricted archives. Company policy." They disappeared down the hall. Eli stared after them, pulse quickening. He stopped Marcus from leaking the project for now, but that meant the timeline was already splintering. New paths, new dangers. And behind those shifting possibilities, something darker stirred, like a shadow watching from the cracks between worlds. He looked through the lab glass at Myra, working at her computer, humming softly. The woman he lost once before. He'd do anything to protect her this time, even if it meant rewriting fate with his own blood. That night, as thunder rolled over the city, Eli stood on the balcony of his apartment, staring at the glowing skyline. 10 years, he murmured, 10 years to stop the end. But he couldn't do it alone. He'd need allies. People he could trust, even in a world where trust once got him killed. He clenched his fists, lightning flashing across the horizon. "This time," he vowed, "I save everyone." And far below, in the reflection of a rain-soaked street, a figure in a hood watched him from the shadows, a face Eli didn't recognize. But he would soon. Because fate never forgets the ones who try to change it. The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days. The city lights blurred through the drizzle as Eli stood at the bus stop, coat soaked, head spinning with memories that didn't belong in this time. Every drop of rain felt like a reminder that time itself was fragile, and he was trespassing in its current. He had changed something, that much was certain. Marcus Vale was in custody. Project Lazarus was delayed. The world still stood. But the more he changed, the more wrong the air felt, as if fate itself resisted him. "Eli," Myra called, jogging across the wet street toward him. She was carrying 2 paper bags, soaked and tearing at the corners. Her laugh cut through the sound of rain. "You planning to drown out here, or are you just being dramatic again?" He smiled despite himself, maybe both. They ducked under an awning together, the smell of coffee and wet pavement mingling in the air. For a moment, it was easy to pretend they were just coworkers, not 2 souls standing at the edge of the end of the world. "You've been weird lately," Myra said, her tone light but eyes sharp, "even for you." Eli hesitated. "Weird how?" "Like you know something the rest of us don't. You stare at people like you're reading their obituary." He exhaled softly. "Maybe I am." She gave him a sideways look. "Okay, that's dark, even for a scientist." He wanted to tell her everything, how he'd seen her die in his arms, how humanity fell screaming into madness, but the words wouldn't come. How do you tell someone you've already buried them once? Before he could respond, a voice broke through the downpour. "Eli Mercer." He turned. A man in a gray hoodie stood by the curb. Mid-30s, hardened face, scar above the eyebrow. Eli's blood turned cold. He knew that face, though he shouldn't have. Jake Ryder, ex-Special Forces. In the old timeline, Jake was a survivor, one of the few Eli trusted in the apocalypse. They had fought side by side, and Jake had died protecting him. Now here he was alive, younger, unaware. Jake studied him carefully. "You work for Zithra, right? I've been looking for you." Eli's instinct screamed danger. "Who sent you?" "No one," Jake said. "Let's just say, I've got questions about what your company's really doing behind closed doors." Myra frowned. "You're not authorized to." Eli cut her off gently. "It's okay, I'll hear him out." They ducked into a nearby diner. The place was quiet, half empty, the neon sign flickering outside. Myra sat beside Eli, suspicious, while Jake sipped black coffee and leaned forward. "I used to run security contracts," Jake began. "Government cleanup jobs. A year ago, we intercepted chatter about something called Project Lazarus. It wasn't supposed to exist. Genetic manipulation, regeneration protocols, and human testing." Eli's heart pounded. "You have no idea how dangerous it is." Jake's gaze sharpened. "Then you admit it's real." Myra looked between them, confused. "Eli, what is this? What's going on?" Eli sighed. "It's a cure for death that went wrong." Jake frowned. "Then maybe we should stop it before it's too late." Eli leaned in. "You don't understand, it's already too late." That night Eli lay awake, his mind in chaos. He wasn't alone anymore. He had Myra, he had Jake. But how could he stop an apocalypse that hadn't yet begun, when every change seemed to ripple unpredictably through time? He opened his laptop, fingers shaking, and began typing everything he remembered about the outbreak. The dates, the mutations, the fall of cities, the betrayals. A timeline of hell. When he finished, he stared at the glowing screen. At the bottom he wrote, "Do not trust anyone, not even the living." Days passed, small shifts began to show. Zithra's board meetings were growing tense. Rumors of leaks, accusations of espionage. Security doubled overnight. And in the corner of Eli's eye, he began noticing things that shouldn't exist, brief flickers of movement where there was none. Faces that blurred in crowds, shadows that bent against the light. Once in a laboratory hallway, he swore he saw Myra, older, her eyes tired watching him through the reflection of the glass. Then she vanished. He stumbled back, heart racing. What the hell is happening to me? A voice echoed behind him. You're not supposed to be here. He spun around, no one, just empty hallways and humming lights. But deep down, Eli understood. The timeline was aware. And it was starting to fight back. Later that week, Jake met him on the rooftop of an old parking garage. The night was cold, the moon silver against the storm clouds. I've been digging, Jake said, lighting a cigarette. You're right, Zithra's dirty, but there's more. There's someone funding them off the books, military contracts tied to bioweapons research. Eli stiffened. That wasn't part of the original timeline. Jake flicked ash into the wind. Guess you kicked the hornet's nest. Eli looked out at the sleeping city below. He'd changed too much already. History was splintering, and something new, something worse, might be brewing in the cracks. We're not just fighting fate anymore, he said quietly. We're fighting the people trying to play God. Jake smirked. Good, I always liked a fair fight. Lightning flashed, and for an instant, Eli saw movement on the rooftop across the street, a silhouette still and watching. Then gone. He felt it again, that same unseen presence twisting the air, reality stretching thin. Jake, he whispered, we're running out of time. And far below, deep within Zithra's restricted lab, a vial labeled LZR-01 flickered under cold fluorescent light. The experiment was still alive. Waiting. Hungry. The morning air was heavy, fog rolling low over the city like a warning. Eli hadn't slept, not properly, every time he closed his eyes. He saw two versions of the same world colliding, one alive, one burning. He poured another cup of stale coffee, ignoring the tremor in his hand. Across the table, Jake leaned against the counter, reading a classified file Eli had printed from the lab's internal server. Myra sat beside him, her expression a mix of confusion and growing dread. So, Jake said finally, tossing the papers down, you're telling me this Project Lazarus was supposed to regenerate tissue, but instead it created a virus that hijacks the host and reanimates dead cells. Eli nodded. That's the short version. The real problem isn't the infection itself, it's the way it adapts. Every death makes it smarter. Myra rubbed her forehead. You talk like you've seen it happen. Eli froze. She noticed, you have, haven't you? He stared at her, at the woman he'd lost once before. I've seen everything it destroys. Jake studied him. And you're saying you remember this from another life, another timeline. Call it what you want, Eli said, but in that timeline you died saving me. Myra, his voice faltered, you didn't make it either. None of us did. Silence fell. Only the hum of the refrigerator filled the room. Myra's voice was soft, and now you think you can stop it. I have to, he whispered. I won't lose you again. That afternoon, Zithra Labs hummed with nervous energy. Security was everywhere. Rumors spread that someone had broken into the storage vault 2 nights earlier, stolen samples, encrypted data, and one experimental serum. Eli's gut twisted. That wasn't supposed to happen yet. He hurried down to sublevel C, where the first containment breach would occur in the old timeline. The hallway was sealed with steel shutters and biometric locks. He pressed his ID to the panel, access granted. Inside, the air was cold, too still. Rows of containment units lined the room, most glowing a faint blue. But one, LZR-01, flickered erratically. Condensation streaked down the glass like tears. Eli approached carefully, heart hammering. No, no, no. The seal was broken. He wiped the fog from the glass and froze. The vial was gone. He ran through the corridors, the sound of his footsteps echoing like gunfire. He burst into Myra's lab, breathless. It's missing, he said. The core sample LZR-01, someone stole it. Myra's face drained of color. You mean? Yes, the beginning of the outbreak. It's happening again. Jake appeared behind him, already pulling a pistol from his jacket. Then we find whoever took it before they crack it open. Eli grabbed his coat. You don't understand. In the original timeline, it wasn't an accident. Someone wanted the virus released. Myra's voice shook. Who would do that? Eli hesitated because deep down he feared the answer. Someone who knew exactly what it could do. Hours later, the trio stood in the rain outside a derelict warehouse on the edge of the industrial district. This is where the stolen sample pinged, Jake said, checking his scanner. Thermal readings inside. They pushed through the rusted door. The air reeked of chemicals and mold. A dim light flickered at the far end of the hall. Eli raised his flashlight and stopped cold. In the center of the room stood a woman in a lab coat, her back to them. The stolen vial sat in her hand, glowing faintly. Myra, Jake whispered. But Eli's stomach dropped. It was Myra. It was Dr. Evelyn Cade, the lead researcher of Project Lazarus, the woman who had unleashed the virus a decade later. Only now she looked older, far older than she should have been, gray streaks in her hair, eyes hollow. She turned slowly, and Eli's heart turned to ice. Because he recognized that look. The look of someone who remembered. You shouldn't be here, Eli, she said softly. You weren't supposed to come back. Jake aimed his pistol, hands where I can see them. Dr. Cade smiled faintly. You think bullets matter to someone who's already lived this twice. Eli took a step forward. You remember the outbreak. She nodded. I remember everything. The world burning, the screams, the endless hunger. I tried to stop it, but time, she laughed bitterly. Time is cruel, isn't it? Eli's voice cracked. Why do it again? Because it never ends, Eli, she shouted suddenly, tears in her voice. Every time we change something, the timeline breaks further. We're ghosts rewriting a story that refuses to stay dead. The vial trembled in her hand. Please, Eli said quietly, stepping closer. Put it down. We can fix this together. Her eyes softened just for a moment. You still believe in hope. And then she threw the vial. Eli lunged. It shattered against the floor. A mist hissed out, spreading like smoke, glowing faintly blue. Get back, Jake yelled, grabbing Myra and dragging her toward the door. Eli coughed violently, the vapor burning his lungs. His vision blurred, everything spinning. Through the haze he saw Dr. Cade collapse, her body convulsing, skin twisting, veins blackening. Eli, Myra screamed, come on. He stumbled out, the door slamming shut behind them. They fell into the mud outside, gasping for air. The warehouse lights flickered violently. Then came the scream. Not human. Not anymore. By the time they reached the car, Eli's vision was fading. Myra held him tightly as Jake floored the accelerator. Stay with me, Eli, she cried. He tried to speak, but his throat burned. In the reflection of the rearview mirror, he saw the warehouse glow, then collapse inward, like time itself folding. The outbreak had begun. Only this time, 10 years early. That night, as sirens wailed in the distance, Eli woke to the sound of thunder and whispering voices. He looked toward the window. In the glass reflection, a shadow moved. A man cloaked in darkness with eyes that gleamed like dying stars. You changed the future, the voice said softly. Now it changes you. Then the reflection smiled and vanished. Rain hammered the roof of the motel room like 1,000 whispers from the dead. Eli sat at the edge of the bed, trembling, his breath shallow. He could still feel the sting of the blue mist in his lungs, faint but constant. Myra was packing, her hands buried in her hair, while Jake scanned emergency reports on his tablet. Hospital lockdowns, Jake muttered. City center under quarantine. And there are, he hesitated, his voice tightening, unconfirmed reports of violent assaults, People biting others, it's starting. Myra's voice cracked. You mean it's happening again? Eli nodded weakly. Faster this time. The release was uncontrolled. We don't have years, we have days. He coughed, a deep, raw sound that rattled his chest. When he pulled his hand away, a thin trace of black-veined fluid streaked his palm. Myra's eyes went wide. Eli, you're infected. He wanted to deny it. He wanted to scream, no, not again. But he knew the signs. He'd seen hundreds fall the same way, the burn under the skin, the fever that came with whispers at the edge of hearing. Jake cursed, kicking the table. We can't lose you. You're the only one who knows what's coming. Eli steadied his breath. It's okay. I remember something from the old timeline. There was an experimental cure, a prototype serum made before the collapse. Myra frowned. Where? Zithra's Omega Vault, Eli said. A restricted wing under the main lab. The military sealed it off right before the fall. Jake checked his weapon. Then that's where we're going. The streets were chaos. Emergency sirens wailed in the distance. The news feeds warned of a chemical outbreak and urged civilians to stay indoors. But Eli could already see it spreading, people running, coughing, bleeding, attacking one another in mindless panic. Zombies weren't born in one day. They began as people who refused to believe the end was real. Myra gripped the steering wheel tightly. God, it's really starting again, isn't it? Eli stared out the window, watching the skyline blur by. No, he said quietly. Not this time, not if we get to that serum. Jake looked back at him. You sure you can hold it together long enough? Eli didn't answer. His vision flickered again, reality warping at the edges. He could feel time bending, the infection sinking with the rift inside him. Every pulse of pain came with a whisper. You weren't supposed to come back. He clenched his jaw. I'll make it, I have to. They reached Zithra Labs just after midnight. The building was dark, emergency lights casting long shadows across shattered glass. The storm had knocked out most of the power. Jake led the way, his pistol raised. Myra followed close, clutching a medical bag, while Eli carried his access card and what little strength he had left. As they entered the main hall, the smell hit them, blood, antiseptic, and something rotting. Myra gagged. Oh my God. Bodies, security guards, scientists twisted on the floor, their eyes milky, their mouths frozen in silent screams. Eli's voice was hoarse. Containment failed already. From somewhere deeper in the building, a guttural growl echoed, wet, hungry, unnatural. Jake aimed his gun toward the sound. Move fast, we're not alone. They descended to the lower levels, the Omega Vault. The walls were lined with reinforced glass and cold steel doors. Electronic locks blinked red. Eli swiped his ID. The system beeped, scanning. Access granted, Dr. Eli Mercer. The vault opened with a hiss. Inside were rows of cryogenic storage units, labeled with project codes. Frost coated everything like thin ice. Myra found the file on a terminal. Here, prototype LZR-02 counteragent. Jake pried open the storage drawer, pulling out a metallic case. Inside were 3 vials of luminous blue liquid, glowing faintly in the dark. This is it, Eli said, barely breathing. The cure that never got tested. Myra loaded one into a syringe, her hands trembling. If we inject this and it fails. It's my only shot, Eli said. Do it. She hesitated, then plunged the needle into his arm. The serum burned like fire. He gasped, convulsing, gripping the table. His veins flared with blue light, the infection fighting back, cells tearing and knitting together at once. Myra shouted his name, but her voice sounded distant, drowned beneath the roar of blood and memory. He saw flashes, the outbreak, Myra's death, the betrayal, the ruined cities, all collapsing inward. Time screamed. And then everything went black. When Eli opened his eyes, the storm was gone. He was lying on the cold floor of the vault, Myra's head resting on his chest, her tears hot against his skin. "Eli," she whispered. He took a shaky breath. The burning was gone, the pain gone. "I think it worked." Jake let out a relieved laugh. "Hell, you're tougher than the apocalypse itself." But Eli's gaze drifted to the shattered glass of the containment unit. Through it he saw movement. A figure stood in the doorway, tall, thin, its eyes glowing faintly blue, veins webbed like lightning under translucent skin. It wasn't human, not fully. It was Dr. Evelyn Cade. She was still alive and smiling. "Congratulations," she said softly. "You cured yourself, but you didn't stop the infection. You just changed what it becomes." Eli's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" Her eyes burned with an eerie light. "The world doesn't end the same way twice." The silence after her words was almost sacred. Rain pattered faintly through the shattered windows above, echoing off steel and glass. Eli could feel Myra trembling beside him, and Jake's finger tightened on the trigger, but no one dared move. Dr. Evelyn Cade stepped forward. Her skin shimmered faintly in the emergency light, veins glowing a subtle blue beneath the surface, like rivers of liquid lightning. Her smile wasn't madness, it was revelation. "You see," she whispered, "death was never the end, it was the doorway." "Stay back," Jake warned. "You take another step." Eli raised a hand. "Wait." Cade's eyes locked on him. "You feel it, don't you, Eli? The serum changed you. You're connected now, to me." Eli's pulse raced. He could feel it, the faint thrum beneath his skin, the echo of something alive and ancient crawling in his blood. The infection wasn't gone. It was evolving. "What did you do?" he demanded. "I didn't do anything," she said, stepping closer, her voice trembling with a strange mix of awe and despair. "You did. You're the first to survive complete exposure. You're what comes after." Jake fired. The bullet struck her shoulder, but she didn't fall. She staggered, straightened, and the wound closed before their eyes. Myra gasped, "Oh my God." Cade turned her gaze on Jake. "Bullets can't kill evolution." Eli stepped forward, his voice low and shaking. "You're wrong. It's not evolution, it's corruption." "Corruption?" Cade laughed, a hollow, grief-soaked sound. "Then what does that make you, Eli Mercer?" Her smile faded. "You're the first proof that the human soul can merge with the virus and still think, still feel. You've transcended death itself." "I didn't want this," Eli snapped. "No," she said softly, "but you were always chosen for it." Before he could respond, alarms erupted overhead. Red lights strobed through the corridors. "Biohazard breach, level 5 containment failure." Cade turned toward the sound, her expression calm, almost maternal. "They're waking." Jake grabbed Myra's arm. "We have to move now." Eli hesitated, staring at Cade. "Why are you helping it?" Her answer was a whisper that chilled him to his core. "Because the world we built deserves to die, and maybe what comes next will finally be honest." She vanished into the smoke and flashing lights, leaving her echo behind. They ran. The hallways were chaos, shattered lights, broken glass, bodies twitching back to life. The infected moved differently this time, faster, more aware. Their eyes burned with the same faint blue glow as Cade's veins. Jake fired bursts down the corridor, but the creatures dodged unnaturally fast, moving with a grotesque intelligence. "Head to the service tunnels," Eli shouted. "They lead to the river." Myra grabbed a security key from a fallen guard, swiping it through the door scanner. The steel gate hissed open, and they tumbled inside just as the infected slammed against it. The sound of claws scraping metal followed them down into the dark. The tunnels stretched for miles beneath the city, old maintenance shafts reeking of mildew and stagnant water. Their flashlight beams flickered as they ran, breath coming in ragged gasps. Myra finally stopped, leaning against a wall. "Eli, talk to me. What's happening to you?" He hesitated, his hand trembling. The blue veins had spread up his arm. His skin felt cold, electric. "I'm changing," he said softly, "but I'm still me for now." Jake looked at him warily. "For how long?" Eli met his eyes. "Long enough to finish this." Myra shook her head, tears forming. "There has to be another way. You can't fight the whole infection alone." Eli smiled faintly. "I already am." He closed his eyes, and for a moment he could hear them. The infected. The hum of thousands of minds, restless and hungry, connected through some invisible web. He could feel the pulse of their movement, across the city, converging, growing. And beneath that rhythm, something larger, a voice whispering through the current of his blood. "You opened the door, now walk through it." He gasped, stumbling back. Myra caught him. "Eli, what's wrong?" He looked at her, eyes burning faintly blue now. "It's calling to me. The infection isn't mindless anymore. It's organizing." Jake cursed. "So it's not just a virus, it's a hive." Eli nodded. "And Cade is its heart." By dawn, they emerged from the tunnels, soaked and shaking. The city skyline burned in the distance, plumes of smoke rising where military drones struck infected zones. But the fires weren't spreading normally. They were patterned, like the outbreak was directing itself. Myra covered her mouth. "It's thinking." Eli stared out at the chaos, his reflection shimmering faintly in the puddles at his feet, his eyes glowing blue. Jake rested a hand on his shoulder. "You said you wanted to change fate. Maybe you still can, but not if you turn into one of them." Eli clenched his jaw. "Then I'll change both, humanity and the infected. I'll rewrite the story from inside." Myra whispered, "That's suicide." He looked back at her, his voice steady. "So was trying to save the world the first time." Far across the city, Dr. Cade stood on a skyscraper rooftop, watching the sunrise through the smoke. Dozens of glowing eyes stared up from the streets below, waiting for her word. She smiled faintly. "He's waking up." The morning after their escape felt like the world itself was holding its breath. Smoke drifted low across the ruins of the city, curling around the burnt-out cars and half-collapsed towers. The wind carried a strange, low hum, like the air itself was vibrating. Eli sat against a cracked wall, staring at his reflection in a broken shard of glass. His eyes, once green, now flickered faintly blue. The veins along his neck shimmered under the skin. The infection wasn't killing him, it was adapting him. Myra crouched nearby, patching a wound on Jake's arm. "We need to move," she said softly. "If the military starts bombing again, this sector won't last the hour." Jake grunted, wincing as she tied the bandage. "If they don't nuke the place first." Eli didn't respond. His mind was elsewhere, deep inside the strange, echoing pulse of the network that had begun to whisper through his blood. "We are one, we are the future." The voice wasn't human, but it wasn't entirely alien either. It sounded like him, or a reflection of him twisted through 1,000 other minds. "Eli." Myra's voice pulled him back. She looked exhausted, her eyes rimmed with red. "You're hearing it again, aren't you?" He nodded slowly. "They're talking, planning. Cade's building something, a hive." Jake frowned. "Hive?" Eli looked up at the smoldering skyline. "She's linking them together. The infected aren't mindless anymore. She's teaching them to think." Myra whispered, "Then we don't stand a chance." Eli shook his head. "We do. Because whatever she made, I'm part of it now, and I can hear them." Jake stared at him. "You mean control them?" Eli hesitated. "Maybe, but I don't know how far I can push it before it pushes back." They traveled north through the outskirts, quiet suburbs long since abandoned. The streets were lined with the bones of the old world, toppled mailboxes, children's bikes, faded stop signs rusted with time. Occasionally, Eli could feel movement, the infected lurking nearby, sensing his presence. But when they drew close, they stopped. Their heads twitched, nostrils flaring as though recognizing something in him. Then they turned away. Myra saw it happen the third time and froze. Eli, they're afraid of you. He shook his head. Not afraid, they know me. Jake's hand hovered near his gun. That's not comforting. Eli closed his eyes. Through the hum, he reached outward like extending a hand through water. The infected froze in the distance, their glowing eyes focused on him. Then slowly, they bowed their heads. The connection snapped. Eli gasped, clutching his chest. Myra grabbed him. Eli. He coughed, blood dripping from his nose. I can't control them for long. It's like trying to hold back a tidal wave. Jake looked shaken. Then maybe don't. Eli wiped the blood away, his voice hardening. If I don't, Cade wins, and she's going to turn every survivor into this. By nightfall, they reached an old school building converted into a survivor shelter. To their surprise, it was still standing, light flickering behind boarded windows. Jake raised his rifle. You sure this is a good idea? Eli nodded. We need supplies and maybe allies. Inside, they found a dozen survivors, ragged, armed, and desperate. Their leader was a broad-shouldered man in his 50s named Cole. His face lit up with disbelief when he saw Eli. Mercer, Cole stepped forward. Eli Mercer from Delta Team, you were declared KIA. Eli blinked. Cole, you're still alive. Cole grinned grimly. Alive, sure, but this world's gone to hell, and the government's planning something worse. Word is they're prepping Operation Clean Slate. Myra frowned. What's that? Cole's face darkened. They're gonna wipe the entire region. Everything infected, survivors, all of it. Total burn. Jake swore, so we've got a clock ticking. Eli clenched his fists. Then we stop it, but first we find Cade. Cole studied him carefully, noticing the faint blue glow beneath Eli's skin. You changed, didn't you? Eli met his gaze. Yeah, but I can use it. Cole hesitated, then nodded slowly. Then let's make it count. That night, Eli couldn't sleep. He sat alone by the window, watching the stars fade behind drifting ash clouds. Myra approached quietly, wrapping a blanket around herself. You should rest. I can't, he said softly. Every time I close my eyes, I see them. She sat beside him. You're scared. He looked at her surprised. For myself. For losing yourself, she whispered. You think the more you use that power, the less of you stays human. He didn't answer. Myra's hand found his. Eli, you're still you. You're the man who dragged me out of a burning city, who gave me hope when there wasn't any left. Don't let the virus take that from you. For a moment, her eyes met his, blue light reflecting in her tears. He leaned closer. I won't, not while you're here. At dawn, the hum inside his veins changed pitch. He stood suddenly, eyes widening. What is it? Myra asked, alarmed. Eli's voice was low, trembling. She's calling them, all of them. Cade's gathering the infected, thousands outside the city. Jake stepped in, grabbing his rifle. Then what the hell do we do? Eli looked toward the horizon, where a faint blue glow began to spread like fire. We go to her, he said, and we end this before the world burns again. Far away, atop a ruined skyscraper, Dr. Cade opened her arms to the swarm gathering below. Their glowing eyes turned upward in unison. She smiled. Welcome home, children. Evolution begins today. The city skyline was a furnace, half alive, half dead. Blue light pulsed through the ruins like veins through a dying heart. From every shattered window, from every cracked street and open subway, the infected emerged. Thousands, tens of thousands. They didn't stagger anymore. They moved with eerie coordination, silent and deliberate, forming ranks around the skyscraper at the city's center, Cade's tower. From the rooftop, A beam of blue energy shot skyward, illuminating the storm clouds like a second sun. It wasn't just light. It was a signal. Eli, Jake, Myra, and Cole watched from a ridge overlooking the city. Cole lowered his binoculars, face pale. That's not an army, that's extinction. Jake muttered, guess we're the resistance then. Myra turned to Eli. Can you stop it, whatever she's doing? Eli clenched his jaw. She's amplifying the hive, linking every infected mind into one. Once it stabilizes, she won't need to spread the virus anymore. The world itself will become it. Cole frowned. Then we take her down before that beam stabilizes. Jake snorted. You say that like we've got an army. Cole's lips twisted into a grim smile. We do. Every survivor within 20 miles heard the broadcasts. They're coming. We might not have numbers, but we've got fire. Eli turned to him. How long before we move? An hour, Cole said. Then we hit the tower from all sides. Eli nodded. Good, because I'm going in first. Jake swore, like hell you are. Myra grabbed Eli's arm. You can't face her alone. He met her eyes. I'm not going there to fight her. I'm going to shut her down. The infection listens to her, but it also listens to me. If I can override her signal, I can end this. But at what cost? Myra whispered. Eli looked away. If I have to burn with it, then at least it ends with me. The attack began at dawn. Smoke bombs rolled through the streets. Gunfire echoed from the rooftops. Survivors surged forward, ragged soldiers of the old world armed with shotguns, Molotovs, and fury. The infected moved as one, a single horrifying organism of flesh and instinct. Bullets tore through them, but the swarm didn't break. They adapted, climbed, evolved mid-battle, some sprouting bone-like armor, others leaping across walls like beasts. Cole's radio crackled. Section 3, move, don't stop firing. Myra screamed as an infected lunged at her. Eli spun, his hand glowing blue, and with a flick of his wrist the creature froze midair. For a heartbeat, the swarm around them halted. Then they turned on each other. Jake's jaw dropped. What the? Eli's voice was strained. I can control them, but only for a few seconds. Blood dripped from his nose, his vision blurred, every heartbeat thundering in his ears. The hive's whisper grew deafening. Join us, Eli, stop fighting. He shoved the voice out. Not yet. They reached the tower entrance, massive steel doors now pulsing faint blue. The air buzzed with static. Eli pressed his hand against the metal. The glow beneath his skin flared brighter, and the doors groaned open. Inside, the walls were lined with organic growth, pulsing flesh fused with technology. The infection had merged with the building itself. Myra gagged, "Oh God." Jake muttered. She turned it into a living machine. At the heart of the atrium, a vast column of blue light rose through the center, the neural core. Cade's voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere. Welcome home, Eli. She stepped out of the light, eyes burning with a terrifying serenity. Her veins glowed brighter than ever, her movement smooth, fluid, inhuman. You see it now, don't you? She said. The new world, no war, no hunger, no death, just unity. Eli's voice shook. That's not unity, that's slavery. She tilted her head. Isn't survival another form of surrender? You humans cling to your pain like it's sacred. I freed them. Eli raised his hand, light flaring between his fingers. You enslaved them to your dream. And what's yours? She whispered. To die as a hero or to live as something else entirely. The floor trembled, the hive roared. Myra and Jake opened fire as infected soldiers poured through the walls. The sound was chaos, metal, screams, gunfire, flesh. Eli stepped forward, eyes blazing, and reached into the network with his mind. He could see everything, millions of blue threads connecting every infected in the city, all converging on one point, Cade. End it, a voice inside whispered his voice. He gritted his teeth and pulled. The swarm convulsed. The light flickered. Cade screamed, clutching her head as the connection faltered. "You can't control it," she shrieked. "It's too much." Eli's voice echoed like thunder. "Then I'll become it." Myra screamed his name as blue light consumed the room. The infection surged through the walls, through the machines, through Eli himself. His skin cracked with light, his body trembling under the force of it. He could feel every infected life, their hunger, their pain, their memories. He felt children hiding in basements, soldiers dying with hope in their hearts, mothers whispering goodbyes. All of it. And then silence. Eli's mind centered in the chaos. "I see them. I see everyone." Cade staggered toward him. "You'll lose yourself." He met her gaze, calm now peaceful. "Then I'll take the infection with me." He reached out, touching her forehead. For a moment her eyes softened. Then the entire tower erupted in light. When the smoke cleared, the hive was gone. The beam had vanished. The infected stood still, motionless, their blue glow fading into nothing. Myra fell to her knees, staring at the crater where the neural core had been. "Eli," she whispered. Jake placed a hand on her shoulder. "He did it. He stopped her." She shook her head. "He promised me he'd come back." Days later, the world began to rebuild. Cole led what remained of the survivors in restoring communication between settlements. The skies were clear for the first time in years. And one morning, as Myra sat by the river's edge, watching the sunrise, she saw something move in the reflection. A figure barefoot, standing on the opposite bank. His eyes glowed faintly, not blue anymore but gold. Eli smiled softly. "Guess I wasn't done changing fate after all." The sun rose over the wasteland like a rebirth. Golden light spilled across the shattered horizon, washing away the blue hue that had haunted the city for years. For the first time in memory, the sky was clear. And from the ashes, life began to stir again. Myra stood among a group of survivors in the courtyard of what used to be a university. Its walls were broken and charred, but the courtyard bloomed with stubborn weeds and small, green shoots, life returning, piece by piece. Cole was shouting orders nearby, coordinating the rebuild. Jake, scarred and tired but alive, was helping lift solar panels onto what would become their new communications tower. But Myra's gaze was fixed beyond the perimeter, toward the river, toward the place she'd seen him. She still wasn't sure if it had been a hallucination or a miracle. That night she sat alone by the campfire. The air was quiet except for the crackle of flame and the distant hum of generators. She was staring at the stars when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "I used to think they'd all gone out." Her heart stopped. Slowly she turned. Eli stood there. He looked human, mostly. His hair was longer, his skin pale, but his eyes glowed faint gold, faintly radiant, as if carrying a piece of sunrise inside them. Myra rose, tears already spilling down her cheeks. "Eli." He smiled. "You still doubt me." She ran to him, colliding into his chest. For a moment she didn't care about how or why, just that he was warm, solid, real. When she finally pulled back, she looked at him in awe. "What happened to you?" Eli exhaled slowly. "I don't know what I am anymore. The virus, the signal, I didn't destroy it. I absorbed it, contained it." Jake's voice came from behind a stack of crates. "So you're saying you've got an apocalypse in your bloodstream?" Eli chuckled softly. "Something like that, but it's quiet now. The voices, they're gone." Myra touched his arm gently. "And Cade?" Eli looked toward the horizon, where the remains of the tower still glowed faintly under the moonlight. "Gone with the old world." In the following weeks, his return changed everything. Cole gathered the scattered survivor camps under one flag, the reclamation. With Eli's help, they began restoring power grids and purifying the rivers. Eli guided them to caches of old research, blueprints for vaccines, clean water systems, and sustainable farming models. It was as if he could see the locations through memory, the leftover fragments of the hive whispering secrets of the past. People started to believe again. Children laughed again. For the first time, there was a future. But not everyone was at peace. One night, as Eli stood on the edge of camp overlooking the flickering lights, Jake approached. "You know they're scared of you," Jake said quietly. "Some think you're the next Cade, a god or a monster." Eli didn't turn around. "Maybe I'm both." Jake sighed. "You saved us. That should count for something." Eli looked at his glowing hand, faintly pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. "You can't save people from fear. You can only give them hope strong enough to fight it." Jake nodded slowly. "You sound like her." "Myra." He smiled faintly. "She talks about you like you're the dawn itself." Eli finally turned to face him. "Then I guess I bet her live up to that." Weeks passed and civilization began to crawl back from the dark. The reclamation built safe zones, connected trade routes, and even restored radio frequencies. One night, Myra broadcast the first message on their new signal. "To anyone still out there, the world is alive. The infection is gone. You are not alone anymore." The transmission echoed across the empty world. And somewhere far beyond the horizon, survivors heard her voice and started walking toward it. But peace never comes without shadows. Eli woke one night to the faint hum in his veins, not blue this time, but red. A pulse faint and sharp, like something waking up. He stumbled outside, breathing hard. The camp was silent, stars shimmering above. Myra appeared behind him. "Eli, what's wrong?" He shook his head, his voice hoarse. "Something's moving, deep underground, a remnant of the hive." Myra's hand tightened on his. "Then we stop it." He turned to her, eyes glowing faintly brighter. "No, I stop it. This is my burden now." Myra shook her head fiercely. "You don't get to face the dark alone anymore." For a long moment, he looked at her, the woman who'd walked through hell beside him, who'd refused to give up even when he had. And then he smiled. "All right, together." They left at dawn, following the hum toward the ruins beyond the city, a place where the earth still pulsed faintly with infection. When they reached the site, they found a single blue flower growing out of the concrete, glowing softly, impossibly alive. Myra knelt beside it. "It's beautiful." Eli nodded, his eyes distant. "It's the last of it." He reached down, touching the petals. The glow faded, absorbed into his hand. The hum went silent. For the first time in years, the air felt clean. He stood, looking out over the horizon, where sunlight spilled over the ruins. "This world's been broken," he said softly, "but maybe it needed to be so we could build something better." Myra smiled, stepping beside him. "And we will together." As the wind swept across the empty city, carrying their words into the dawn, the sky began to warm, streaks of pink and gold breaking through the fatting gray. The apocalypse was over. Not because humanity survived, but because it changed. And in the center of it all stood a man who had defied fate, carrying both death and life in his veins, the living proof that even in the darkest of worlds, hope can be reborn. The world that rose from the ashes was not the same one that had fallen. The skyline, once a graveyard of steel, now shimmered with life. Vines crawled across broken towers, flowers bloomed from cracks in the asphalt, and rivers once blackened by decay now ran clear again. The earth was healing not through science alone, but through something deeper, older, almost spiritual. Eli stood on a cliff overlooking what had once been the city center, now a sprawling settlement known as Haven. Solar towers hummed beside wind turbines, children's laughter carried through the morning air, and survivors from every corner of the continent were gathering here, rebuilding not for power or profit, but for each other. Beside him, Myra adjusted the strap of her new vest, embroidered with the emblem of the reclamation. "They're calling it the First Council," she said. "Representatives from every settlement. They want you to lead it." Eli smiled faintly. A man with half a virus for a soul leading the new world. Sounds poetic. "Sounds fitting," she countered. "You gave them this chance." He turned his gaze to the horizon, the faint gold in his eyes flickering like candlelight. "I didn't give them anything. They took it back themselves. I just opened the door." Myra looked at him for a long time. "You still think you're not one of us, don't you?" He didn't answer. That night the First Council met in the rebuilt University Hall. Torches and solar lamps lit the cracked walls. Survivors sat around a wide table made of salvaged metal and wood, maps and notes scattered across it. Cole stood at the head, his deep voice steady. "The western borders are stable, farms are producing again. We've got medicine, clean water, and growing numbers. But we've also got fear. People still whisper about the Hive King." All eyes turned to Eli. He met their gazes without flinching. "I'm not a king. I'm just what happens when humanity refuses to die." A murmur swept through the room. Cole raised a hand. "That's exactly why we need him. He's proof we can evolve without losing ourselves." Myra stepped forward, voice clear and strong. "The infection took everything from us, but it also taught us something. That unity isn't control, it's trust. We survived because we chose to trust each other." Silence followed her words. Then one by one the council members nodded. Eli smiled faintly. "Then it's settled. No more rulers, no more gods, just people building a world worth keeping." Months passed, Haven grew, roads connected settlements. The first new schools opened. Children learned from history, not from fear. But even peace had its ghosts. Sometimes Eli would wake at night to faint whispers in the dark, echoes of the hive, fragments of memory not his own, faces he had absorbed in that final moment. He never told anyone. He just walked to the outskirts of the settlement, sat beneath the stars, and listened. Myra always found him there. "You still hear them," she'd say softly. He'd nod. "They're not angry anymore. It's like they're watching, waiting." "For what?" "For me to let go," he whispered. She took his hand, warm against his colder skin. "Then don't stay. This world still needs you." He looked at her, a smile playing at his lips. "No, Myra, it needs you." Years passed. The golden hue in Eli's eyes began to fade. His body aged slower than others, but his presence was constant, a quiet guardian in a world still learning to hope. Under his guidance, the reclamation turned into the New Dawn Initiative, a movement built on peace, empathy, and science balanced with nature. When the last remnants of infection were finally eradicated, the people of Haven held a great celebration beneath the stars. Music, laughter, life. Eli stood apart from the crowd, watching the lights dance across the sky, lanterns rising into the air like new constellations. Myra found him there, as she always did. "You should be down there," she said, smiling. "They're celebrating you." He chuckled softly. "No, they're celebrating that I'm no longer the story." She leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. "So what happens now?" He looked at her, at the city alive with color and laughter, the same city that had once drowned in blood and silence. "Now," he said, "we live." The wind swept gently across the cliffs that night, carrying the echoes of voices, laughter, song, promise. Eli stood at the edge, watching the sunrise break once more over the horizon. His eyes, now purely human, caught the light, and for the first time he didn't feel the hum of the hive or the weight of destiny. "Just peace." He smiled, turning back toward Myra as she called his name from below. And as the dawn rose, bright, golden, and full of life, the world that had once ended began again.